Welcome, everyone. Hello, good evening, buenas noches. Welcome to a Roadmap to Freedom Town Hall. I'm so happy, so delighted that you could all join us this evening. We are here to talk about the critical issues facing our communities and to talk about the Roadmap to Freedom, our progressive vision for transforming the immigration system. Just before we get into the meat of the conversation, I want to share with you that I come into this conversation feeling an immense sense of responsibility to deliver for our communities, and remembering and reflecting in the time that the last time that Democrats had power, a Democratic trifecta, and controlled the government across the board. And I was a young undocumented student activist making my way doing the advocacy in DC with United We Dream at that point. And I say that because so often, just before we get into the politics and the strategy, so often it becomes very quickly a conversation about the inside the beltway strategy. And what's so clear to those of us who have walked these paths, who are connected to community, who have family who is undocumented, who our family is maybe mixed status family. What is so clear to us is that this isn't merely about how do we get to 60 or how do we get into reconciliation, that all of the work that we do is deeply personal. And I think it's important that we ground in that whenever we engage and start with these conversations, because we always have to answer the question of why are we here? What are we fighting for, and what's the motivation for why we do what we do every day? So just to shift a little, we want to come out of the past 4 years of the Trump administration, not only by reversing the hundreds of anti-immigrant policies that were passed under Trump, but also building a new system that is fair, humane, and functional. In fact, what we were able to learn or to make more clear to more people across our country in the last 4 years is just how cruel the system truly is, how racist it is, how cruel it is, how it preys on people of color, on low-income immigrants. And we have an opportunity to change that. We have an opportunity to get people on a path to citizenship. We have an opportunity to overhaul our immigration enforcement system. And so, wow, what a moment this is. My name is Lorela Praeli. I am the president of Community Change Action. I am a fighter, a dreamer, and I spent 14 years of my life as an undocumented person in this country. And I now have the privilege of co-running this organization, which is more than 50 years old, and is dedicated to lifting up the voices of and empowering people of color and immigrants. Community Change Action is also the hub that houses Firm Action, the country's largest network of grassroots immigrants' rights and immigrant justice organizations. I am thrilled to introduce my co-panelists tonight, a slate of fierce champions and advocates for immigrant justice. With us is Congresswoman Jayapal from the great state of Washington, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from New York, and Congressman Jesus, or as we know him, Chuy Garcia, from Illinois. Also, our fearless leader from the great state of Nevada, Laura Martin, the Executive Director of Plan Action. Welcome to this conversation. Let's get into it, right? We've reached this point in the immigration debate because of the tireless work of immigrants and advocates and activists and champions who show up every day to fight for our families. And because of regular people across this country who decided that we could do better as a country, that the status quo was not and is not enough. And they decided that going into November and then in January, we did the work of flipping the House in 2018, the White House in 2022, and securing 2 Senate seats in Georgia in January of this year. And we did not get here by accident. Let me just underscore that for a second. We did not get here by accident. We built the power. We built the infrastructure. We went out there and told our people to go and vote, to create and build the mandate for change. And so here we are. Here we are. Congress and the White House must now deliver for our communities. We have a single goal, right? It's really 2 goals: to provide relief, to win citizenship for as many people as possible, and to overhaul our cruel, dysfunctional, and wasteful enforcement apparatus. This is a fight our movement has waged for decades. This is a promise the President Biden, and Congress have made. And we are beyond ready to turn the page on the Trump era, when immigrants were the #1 target. So we have a moral imperative, we have a policy imperative, we have a political imperative. And for those of us sitting in undocumented households or in or who are sitting in undocumented households or mixed status households, we also have a personal imperative. And we have a historic opportunity because it's been almost 40 years since Congress passed a legalization package. It's been 20 years since the DREAM Act was first introduced. And so really, I feel like this moment is ours to seize. And the roadmap to freedom provides a vision for us to work towards, right? A vision of transformation of our immigration system. And at the same time, we have an opportunity now this year to pass legislation that provides a path to citizenship for millions, and many tools available to get that done. So we will be looking to Democrats in both the House and the Senate to make it happen. I know we're going to get into the details later in the conversation, but first, let's dive in with our panel to talk about the roadmap to freedom. So I want to bring in our champion. There you are. Congresswoman Jayapal. Let's kick off the conversation by starting with the roadmap to freedom resolution. Tell us, what is it? What is the purpose of the transformative vision in this political moment?
Thank you, Lorella, and thank you for that beautiful opening, which I think is just so important to ground ourselves in this moment, why we're here, what we can do, and who we are. And it is really great to be here with Firm Action, with Community Change Action, with my colleagues, Representatives Garcia and Clark, and all the incredible on-the-ground organizers, and everyone really joining us tonight. And I guess I want to start with 15 seconds of just grounding myself in this conversation as well, because I think it's important that you know who we all are. I am an immigrant, a proud immigrant who came to this country at the age of 16 by myself. And then I had 20 years of working in the immigrant rights movement with Firm Action, with Community Change, with so many of you, starting the largest immigrant rights organization in Washington State, our wonderful organization, One America, and then leading a lot of the fights to try to get humane and just immigration reform passed. And that included, leading some big civil disobedience moments, including with Firm and with We Belong Together, where I was arrested because I believed so firmly in nonviolent resistance and the ability to build movements through that. Now I have the privilege of serving as one of only 14 naturalized citizens in Congress. And I'm just so excited to be leading with my colleagues this roadmap to freedom, because you said it. this is not just about reversing the hateful and xenophobic policies of the last administration. Of course, we're going to do that. But it's actually to fix an immigration system that has been broken, embedded with racism, right, for decades, and frankly, made worse by both Republican and Democratic administrations along the way, to the point where today it's a system that criminalizes migration, separates families, and honestly distorts the humanity and the contributions of immigrants to this country. So that's where our Roadmap to Freedom resolution comes in. It is about this firm belief that we should establish a system that is grounded in respect, in dignity, in family unity, and opportunity for all immigrants. And I'm so proud to have introduced it alongside members of Congress that represent the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Asian Pacific American Caucus, because immigration is an issue that affects every single community. And this resolution was developed in close consultation with grassroots groups like Firm Action, labor advocates, civil rights advocates, racial justice advocates. And fundamentally, it is our North Star for what immigration reform needs to look like, what humane, progressive immigration policies should look like. It reestablishes the United States as a beacon of hope and humanitarian protection in several critical ways. First of all, it ensures that a fair immigration process that establishes a roadmap to citizenship for the full 11 million while centering family unity and promoting and preserving diversity is at the center of everything and anything that we do. Second, it welcomes immigrants by supporting integration efforts and ensuring access to critical public services. And as someone who helped create the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in Seattle, as well as our National Partnership for New Americans, I know just how important it is to provide our newest Americans with essential pieces of support, like help with getting a job, help with getting language access, learning English, help with civic engagement. Third, the resolution brings an understanding that we have to uphold the rights of all workers. I was just in a conversation the other day where Republicans, it was in Education and Labor Committee, where there were people making arguments that immigrants are taking away the jobs of other workers, Black workers, for example, American workers. And we know that that's just not true. We know that this is not a conflicting vision, that if we allow for a humane immigration system, then you actually take away the incentive of employers to manipulate and exploit workers. We know that immigrants across America are working on the front lines of this pandemic, keeping our country running while being called essential, but treated as expendable. That has to change during the pandemic and forever. Fourth, the Roadmap to Freedom invests in border policy that protects the rights of communities in the borderlands. Not only do we need to stop building walls, but we actually have to end the mass militarization of the region and uphold the civil rights of all the millions of people who call that region home. And finally, core to the resolution, our vision creates a just way to uphold immigration laws. That includes by prioritizing the freedom of immigrants, investing in humane, community-based alternatives to detention for those who need it, and creating what we're calling scalable consequences for enforcement. What does that mean? It means that you don't detain or deport somebody who commits the important act of actually trying to provide for their family in the same way that you might address someone else in a very different situation. We do not believe that detention is the answer. Deportation is not the answer. Criminalizing immigration and immigrants is not the answer. We have to modernize our system, and we have to have reasonable, humane, and dignified options on the table that don't rip families apart. So thanks to the organizing that all of you and all of us have done over the years and the pressure that we've built up, Senator Menendez and Representative Sanchez are about to introduce the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, which is President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris's robust immigration bill. And it is a powerful testament to you, to everyone on this call, to our movement, that it is being released now within the first month of the presidency, because that is extremely rare, and it would not happen without the organizing on the ground for so many years. And so as we review their plan and we work with them to strengthen the plan, the Roadmap to Freedom is the big visionary document, because even that day one Biden bill does not address every piece of reform that needs to be addressed, including detention reform, things like that. And so the roadmap says these are all the different pieces that must be addressed if we are to have a humane and just immigration system. And I am really looking forward to working with all of you on that. And then just one final thing I was recalling as you were talking about the years that we've spent organizing to get to this moment. I was thinking about how it was just about 10 years ago when I was an immigrant rights activist on the outside, leading a bus from Seattle to Arizona to protest SB 1070, sleep on church basement floors. And we were talking then about building political power and turning Arizona blue. And Lorella, you know, there weren't a lot of people who thought it could happen, but it happened because of the organizing on the ground that immigrant groups and other groups of color did in Arizona that delivered our victory. So change is slow sometimes, but it does happen.
Yes, it does happen. And in fact, we have people on this call who are paving, right, that path and building power at the state and local level every day. And it's so incredible to be in conversation with you because you've done that, right? You're now in Congress, but you've done that right on the ground in the state of Washington. And so I just think it's so important here to emphasize that it's important to have our North Star and our goal, to use it as an organizing tool, to know what our march looks like. And our aspirations and our vision are not in contrast with winning in the present moment, right? And we're going to get into that conversation in just a minute. So I want to bring in here, I want to thank you, Congresswoman, for always grounding us in what is possible and grounding us and reminding us of the fights we have waged and being the partner that you are. And I want to bring in Ana Calderon from the state of New Jersey to talk to us about this moment of urgency, to share with us her story and the fight that she's leading every day on the ground in the state of New Jersey. So Ana Calderon, can I get you in here? Okay.
Hello, everyone. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for tonight. I am excited to share this space with our leaders in Congress. I am a youth member at Make the Road New Jersey Action and live in Newark, New Jersey. Like many young people, I was left out of DACA because I did not fit into the narrow qualifications. I have been forced to navigate this country, the school system, employment, and the pandemic, all while being undocumented. But on January 20th, I was hopeful for the first time in a long time. My parents and I immigrated from Spain in 2012. My family has been in this country for 8 years without a pathway to citizenship, without a way of living without fear. My parents have worked really hard to give me the education I deserve in this country. In my high school senior year, they were working 2 jobs a day to save up for my tuition. My mom is a domestic worker. She cleans houses for a living, and my dad works in construction. They used to work together at night at this building, and they would clean it. Sometimes I would join them when I didn't have a lot of homework, but it was really tiring since I had school in the morning. I am currently a student at Rutgers University studying neuro, reach my educational goals and become a doctor. This pandemic has made it even more clear for me, now more than ever, there is a need for doctors who can understand and communicate with immigrant communities. During the height of the pandemic, I was working at an electronics store. Unfortunately, my employer was not following COVID safety, and I had to choose between protecting my family and my job. I chose my family. I'll be lying if I said last year has been easy, but there's a bright future ahead. More opportunities with the new administration. We have spent years fighting for the day that our family will no longer have to be afraid of deportation of being separated, and that I will get a chance at a better life. I look forward to working alongside our leaders in Congress, like my Senator Bob Menendez, to ensure that we pass legislation that creates a pathway to citizenship for all. I am hopeful that people like my father and mother, who are essential workers, will be included in a pathway to citizenship, and that people like me who did not qualify for DACA will be part of the 11 million people, including in the Biden's administration immigration plan. This is for people like my mom and my dad, who have given me the world one log shift at a time. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Ana, and future Dr. Calderon, right?
Yes.
I so appreciate you sharing your dreams with us, but not only your dreams, but how you show up every day to fight to make them real. And how this is not only a personal fight for you, but it is a fight that you wage on behalf of your parents and millions more, right? So it is an honor to fight along your side, Ana, and I believe that we will win this year, and we will continue to win and to build power to win more for our communities. So thank you for being with us tonight, for sharing your story, and for the work that you do in the state of New Jersey to ensure that we're organizing our members of Congress there and building the infrastructure that we need on the ground. I want to turn to Congresswoman Clark, another one of our champions. I want to ask you to respond to Ana. You know, you've been a leader here, and can you talk to us about what a path to citizenship would mean for immigrants like Ana, about the opportunities in the Hill, both with President Biden's bill and beyond, right? There are a number of efforts in the House in particular where we can unlock some movement and unleash sort of movement on critical pieces of legislation in this moment that would seek to legalize people like Ana who were left out of previous DREAM Acts.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me, Lorella. Ana, thank you for sharing your story with us. It was so heartwarming, and I know that it's a battle for you, but you will be victorious. Your strength, your endurance, and perseverance is a hallmark of the immigrant spirit that helped build this country. So let me thank you so much for your endurance. And I definitely believe there's going to be Dr. Calderon. Let me also acknowledge my colleagues, Pramila Jayapal, the chairwoman of our Progressive Caucus, and my brother Chuy Garcia, congressman from Illinois, Chicago. I am so proud to be on the team called the Closers. We are working together to advance and will shortly reveal the comprehensive immigration bill of 2021 that the Biden-Harris administration has touted to the American people. It prioritizes pathways to citizenship and focuses on achieving humane and a just immigration system that reflects our nation's core values. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that our essential workers, like your parents, Ana, are the lifeblood of our economy, our nation's economy. 11 million, whether it be undocumented, 11 million people, whether it be undocumented, dreamers, TPS, DED recipients, refugees, deserve a swift, humane, and comprehensive action on their behalf. And it's not enough to merely halt the harmful immigration practices of the Trump administration and what I call ill-advised policies of previous administrations. We must do more, and we must support the Biden-Harris administration and both chambers of Congress, and we can do that. Ana, your Senator Menendez is leading on the Senate side. We believe that the constellations are lined up so that we can bring swift relief to families like yours, Anna, where you have not been here long enough to really avail yourself of DACA. And DACA was just a temporary fix anyway. We want to be able to, of course, advance that because so many people already applied, are in the DACA system. But for a young woman like you, for like your parents, we want to make sure that there is a clear pathway to citizenship, whether that is to become a resident of the United States and the documentation required for that, and then moving into the 5 years of becoming a citizen, or whether you qualify already because you've been here 8 years already, you've already contributed to our nation, you are paying taxes. As much as people want to say, oh, immigrants don't pay taxes, immigrants pay a lot of taxes. You deserve it. And we believe in you. We believe that you add value and you are a reflection of the American dream. So as my dear friend and colleague and champion for justice, the late great John Lewis said, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And what I'm saying is the time has come. You're hearing about the roadmap to freedom, and we will not stop. We will not relent until you can say that you are Spaniard American, and you can hyphenate your affiliation, being fully American with a homeland that will hold you up as a model for how immigrants have built and make this country great. So thank you, and I yield back, Lavella.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And, you know, we want to continue to count on your support to ensure that we get more CBC members onto the resolution, the Roadmap to Freedom resolution.
Absolutely.
Of course, President Biden's bill. And also, right, I want to keep coming back to this, which is this bill that we're working on that's a little bit more on the longer term, but that we can probably push out, cannot be at odds with the other things that we can move in this moment. Right. And so that just feels so important for all of us to be moving a number of different strategies in this moment. And we're going to talk about that we're going to engage in conversation about this, but so grateful for your leadership in really leading the CBC on this issue, and want to continue to be in partnership with you to ensure that we get more Congressional Black Caucus members onto the Roadmap to Freedom resolution and onto the bills. Thank you.
Lavella, you know, my parents were immigrants to this nation. And so my story is partially an immigrant story. When your parents have to navigate a new land, when they have to face not only xenophobia, but racism, when I think about, you know, my aunts, my uncles, the sponsorships and how we went about family reunification, I've lived that story. And so I bring that lived experience to the Congress of the United States of America, a reflective of the diversity of immigrants that reside in the 9th District of New York, who built New York City and continue to build and improve upon what the immigrants who came before us were able to accomplish. So sign me up, whatever means we need to go, whatever different strategies we need to employ. There will be other pieces of legislation that will be sort of riding the rails alongside the Biden-Harris legislation. That's not to be forgotten. We've got a lot of work to do to turn our system into a 21st century immigration system, one that does not grind up the lives of human beings in the way that this current system does. And I'm all in 100%. And thank you for having me. And I look forward to any further questions you may have.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You could not hear me cheering because I was on mute because you were speaking. I want to bring in my my movement sister from Nevada. I want to bring you in, Laura. I always pause, Laura, because I said Laura, Laura. I want to get it. I want to get it. I'm like, what language am I speaking in right now? Okay, so I want to bring you in to talk about another key action from the Biden administration on day one, which is when DHS issued a memo pausing most deportations for 100 days, right? Unfortunately, the moratorium was blocked by the courts. And we know that Black immigrants from places like Haiti and Cameroon are still being deported. Right? And hundreds of women and children and babies were deported to Haiti just last week, despite the serious political instability on the ground. So Laura, what would you say to President Biden now? And then Laura, after you, Congresswoman Clark, I want to go to you to ask you, I know that you've also led the pushback on deportations of Black immigrants. And so we'll just want you to weigh in after Laura.
Yeah, thank you so much. And especially thank you to CCA and all of the representatives on the call for holding this space for folks to learn more about the roadmap to freedom and the work that's being done for immigration reform with this new administration. I also want to lift up the Black Alliance for Immigration, and also UndocuBlack has been doing a lot of this work. And I also want to back up a little bit to understand the special situation a lot of Black immigrants are in and why this is an important topic for a relatively small population of immigrants. So we all know this past summer in 2020 was a watershed moment for organizing around issues of policing and justice. We're at a moment where even the most moderate politician understands and acknowledges the role institutional racism plays in the misapplication of justice in the United States. Communities of color are over-policed, and people of color are often overcharged. And for Black immigrants, the stakes are even higher. If you live in a jurisdiction that criminalizes traffic tickets, or you have a sheriff that cooperates with ICE, or has an official 287G agreement, your jaywalking ticket, your driving with expired tags on your car can turn into deportation. And in many ways, that is a life sentence. And so it shows up in the overrepresentation of Black immigrants in deportation cells, in deportation proceedings, and is directly connected to institutional racism in the American policing system. And that's why we have to remember, which is why Plan Action is so supportive of the roadmap to freedom, we have to remember that racial justice is immigrant justice. It is tied together. So what I would say to the Biden administration is simply, you have to do better. We can't say Black Lives Matter, acknowledge the system is broken, then deport planes full of Black immigrants, including babies and children and people who have no criminal convictions. There is no doubt that Joe Biden and our Vice President Kamala Harris walked into an impossible situation trying to undo the damage and the cruelty caused by the Trump administration. There is no better time than now. There's no time to waste to keep families together and to get better control of ICE. President Joe Biden must keep his promises and heal this country and combat racial inequities. The Biden administration must issue new guidelines to close loopholes that ICE is literally flying planes full of Black immigrants through to continue mass deportations in this country.
Thank you, Laura. And I want to also lift up here, as you did, Patrice Lawrence from UndocuBlack and Gerline Joseph from the Haitian Bridge Alliance, who are just killing it, like really making the case and elevating what a moral outcry this is and the responsibility that the White House has in this moment to make this stop. So Congresswoman Clark, I want to come back to you because you've been leading on the pushback of these deportations. So, where are you on this right now? What might you have to share with us?
Yes, I think that first of all, the Biden administration needs to pull all of its key players together. That's Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State. Because at the end of the day, it is within their authority and jurisdiction to stop these deportations on a number of grounds, if not humanitarian. And we've had conversations already with the director of ICE. He's going to be getting back to myself and Benny Thompson, because as Laura has rightly stated, there have been several flights taking individuals back to Haiti in the midst of civil unrest. In the midst of civil unrest. We know what has been taking place in Cameroon, and we know that many immigrants of African descent have been abused through the Remain in Mexico policy. I have visited many who are seeking refugee status. People from the Caribbean region of African descent, people from the continent of Africa have all been bearing the brunt. And because, of course, of the racial dynamic, you know, there is no blending. There is only an appeal for justice, for human dignity. And that is the role that we all must play. So as well as the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, are asking and demanding that there be a swift response to to our demand that they end these deportations and provide us with their alternate means of being able to keep these folks here in temporary protected status. And if they can't do that, we will haul them into Congress, where they will have to answer to the public for that. But, you know, because, you know, as I've stated earlier, the system has been broken for so long. Family fragmentation has not been something that we have discussed as much. And I can tell you that in my constituency, being a person of African descent, even in a blue state, has meant a lot of family fragmentation. When you have a young person who's in high school hanging out with their friends, they don't know immigration status from immigration status. Many folks don't even know they're residents of the United States and not citizens. And so you jump the turnstile with your good friend. Here you are 10 years later, ready to go off to college, and boom, ICE picks you up. You know, the hardship, the heartbreak that has taken place because we have not been vigilant. We have not had a human-centered system. We have allowed judicial discretion to be discarded, has meant a lot of pain, anguish, heartache, and economic hardship, because oftentimes we find that in communities of African descent, it's the breadwinner that is put into deportation, proceedings. And so the battle for us now is, one, to shut down the Trump era deportation processes, but two, to advance our legislation to protect, even if it's temporarily, until our road to reform is complete, so that no further families have to go through the heartache and the pain that so many have had to endure. So with that, I'm ready for the battle. I'm ready to rumble. We've given notice, you know, to Director Johnson of ICE that this is a new day, that we are giving him full support to transform ICE into a department that is not targeting communities of color, is not targeting those who are productive in our civil society and going after the lowest hanging fruit, but they are using intelligence to remove individuals who have demonstrated criminal harm to either the immigrant community or communities at large. And until we see that, they're going to be focused on like a laser, because we've got to have that switch flipped.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clark. And I want to bring in here Congressman Garcia, who has been with us on these fights as well. You know, like your colleagues here, you've also led on the immigration enforcement system in particular, on recognizing how cruel and dysfunctional our system is, and how it must be transformed, which is a key element of the roadmap to freedom. So I want to invite you to comment on the conversation, but really also on, you know, the vision here, and what's possible in this moment as it relates to transforming our enforcement system. We can't hear you, Congressman. I think you just have to unmute. There you go.
Okay, I thought you were controlling it. Thank you so much, Lorela, and of course, thank you to Firm Action and Community Change Action for organizing this town hall, and for everyone joining us tonight. You'll often hear us refer to Roadmap to Freedom as an opportunity to reimagine an immigration system that is just and humane. And with this, we're also confronting longstanding racism and xenophobia that has forced Black and brown immigrants into the police to deportation pipeline. It's no accident that the same communities that are over-policed due to racism and racial bias are the same communities suffering at the hands of immigration enforcement. Being Black or brown makes you a target for police too frequently across America. Being a Black or brown immigrant will then put you at risk for automatic deportation, as my colleague from New York has pointed out. Take a low-level crime like marijuana possession in the immigration. If the immigration official has a reason to believe that you may have sold marijuana, that is enough to deport someone in the law today. The reality is that since 1996, one mistake, even if it occurred decades ago, is enough to deport someone to a country they barely know. Many Black and brown immigrants already served their sentence. Deporting them means punishing them twice. Just as the criminal justice reform movement seeks to end the harsh policies of the war on drugs, the movement for immigrants' justice calls for drastic changes to the immigration system that will ensure due process for all. And that's one of the bills that I filed in the last Congress, and again in this Congress, A New Way Forward seeks to do. In the middle of racial reckoning and as our country grapples honestly with its past, it's time that we disentangle law enforcement from federal immigration enforcement. At this moment in history, we're called to bring compassion and dignity to the immigration system, and this resolution serves as a roadmap to that brighter, more just future for all.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Laura, for raising this critical issue, and to all of you for joining us today and continuing to show leadership on issues that disproportionately affect Black and brown immigrants. Now, I just want to ask people who have joined us today, if you want to get involved and join our fight, text freedom to 40649. That's freedom to 40649. We are a little bit behind schedule here. So I want to, and we're transitioning from like our aspiration to what can Congress deliver in this moment? How do we leverage every tool at our disposal to come through on the promises and the commitments? So I want to start with you, Congresswoman Jayapal, on reconciliation, right? We're hearing a lot about the term budget reconciliation, and it's tied to relief and recovery for the health and economic crisis that are now nearly a year long. And so can you break down what reconciliation means and how you and other members of Congress can fight for immigrants by using the budget reconciliation process?
Yeah, definitely. It is a wonky process, but I'll try to break it down. And before I do that, I just want to bring us back again to why the roadmap is so important. because what's going to happen is we're going to have these different opportunities through budget reconciliation, you know, the Biden day one immigration bill. Other pieces are going to come forward, but we should be clear that there isn't one bill that has everything other than the roadmap to freedom, which has all of the principles, because even the Biden day one bill does not have anything around detention reform, which is really critical. I have a Dignity for Detained Immigrants bill that addresses that, but it's not contained within the Biden bill. So I think it is really important for people to think about how we get a lot of our members of Congress on board with the roadmap, because it is the one place where this North Star vision is put forward. Okay, with that big picture, now let's get into the budget reconciliation piece. So most legislation needs to receive 60 votes in the Senate in order to be brought to a final vote. But there is this process called budget reconciliation, which allows a bill to be passed with just a simple majority, right? So that's 50 votes plus Vice President Harris, who presides over the chamber if her vote is needed, if there's a tie. So the process begins with a resolution that instructs committees in the House and the Senate to draw up legislation. That process has already happened, and now committees are finishing their work this week and next week. And the final bill, in order to qualify for this only 50-vote threshold, 51-vote threshold, which means that if we kept all the Democrats together, all the 50 Democrats in the Senate together, and we added Vice President Harris, that it could be passed without any additional support from the other side. Now, if Republicans want to come along with us, great. But in order to qualify for that 51-vote threshold, the final bill has to either reduce or increase the deficit, the federal deficit, by no more and no less than the exact amount specified in the original resolution. So budget reconciliation is really important right now, because with exactly 50 Democrats in the Senate and 50 Republicans, it is the quickest way to get a COVID relief bill passed and signed into law. Instead of needing 10 Republican votes to get to 60, you can move forward without them. And as millions of families are continuing to experience devastation from the ongoing pandemic, we just have to be able to get help out immediately. Last week, on behalf of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, I fought to secure two important victories as part of this process. First, including a $15 minimum wage into the bill, which is a huge priority for us across the country. And second, ensuring that everyone who received a survival check last time, including those living in mixed status families, gets one this time. As many of you know, the federal minimum wage hasn't increased 1 cent over the last decade. And by increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, we're going to give 30 million workers who are disproportionately Black and brown, 25% Black, 30% Latinx, and immigrant workers a raise while lifting nearly 1 million people out of poverty. The second big victory was defeating an effort to lower the income threshold for who receives these survival checks. According to some of the things that were being discussed and the proposals that were being put forward, there was a proposal to lower the income thresholds considerably, and that would have left out 40 million people who received a check last time if we hadn't succeeded in keeping the thresholds the same. So as we prepare to bring this relief bill up in the Budget Committee next week, I'm a member of that committee. I'm also fighting to make sure that there's robust funding for expanded unemployment assistance, vaccine distribution that will help us to really recover from this economic crisis. And members of Congress can and must also protect immigrants through this relief package. I fought to ensure that we finally included mixed status families in the last bill that was signed in December, but really we need to ensure that all families receive help regardless of immigration status. So that is absolutely critical. Very last thing, we have to protect immigrants through this reconciliation process by ensuring that it includes eviction moratoriums, paid sick leave, child tax credits, investments in education for all students. And so this is a big piece, but we are constrained a little bit by the budget reconciliation thresholds. And Lorella, you didn't ask me this question, but if we could get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, which I have endorsed, then that would mean that legislation could move forward with a simple majority. And that would be an enormous boon to Black and brown and immigrant communities across this country.
Absolutely, right? Both on the filibuster and really on maximizing what we can do via budget reconciliation. And so, you know, we've been hearing a lot from our folks and our partners that we can't talk about essential workers. And you said this at the beginning, Congresswoman, we can't say that they are essential and also expendable, essential and deportable. And so I really do think that as the Biden administration begins to develop the framework for their second package, right, on jobs and recovery, that cannot come out without a serious commitment to legalizing essential workers who happen to be immigrants. So I'm going to turn to you, Congressman Garcia, keeping with this theme of COVID relief and recovery, right? Let's talk a little bit more about essential workers. They've kept our country running during the pandemic. Millions of immigrant essential workers are still deportable, despite the critical role that they play. And so how do we, in these efforts that are moving, right, like building on budget reconciliation, how do we make sure that we include them in this upcoming effort, in this upcoming fight?
Well, from farm workers to grocery store employees to nurses and teachers, immigrants remain on the front lines and are at higher risk of COVID infections. I've heard from just too many of my own constituents who've had to make the tough decision. Should they go to work or potentially expose themselves and their families to COVID-19, or potentially lose their job with no access to a safety net program, survival checks, or any other type of relief? The fact that our immigrant communities remain in fear of being deported amid a pandemic is simply unacceptable. I was disappointed to see that no plan to include a pathway to citizenship for undocumented essential workers, DACA or TPS holders as part of an upcoming COVID-19 relief package, despite calls from Democrats and immigrant advocates to do so. As many of you already know, President Biden's pathway to citizenship for 11 million immigrants includes DACA and TPS recipients, farm workers, and other essential workers, and that's a positive first step. But I'm also working to ensure that mixed status families receive survival checks in the next package. Anything less is unacceptable and, quite frankly, would be a moral failure a year into the pandemic. Our communities deserve all the rights and protections extended to other essential workers, and they also deserve the opportunity to remain in the country that's kept it running during the pandemic. Now it's our turn to do the right thing and provide a pathway to citizenship. It's the very least that we can do. I think there's a new appreciation for the role of essential workers, and that's why we'll probably see even standalone bills in the coming weeks in Congress to help provide a pathway to legalization and citizenship for many of these essential workers.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Congressman. I want to bring in Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, who's the executive director of Unidos Minnesota, and is here to talk to us as we're talking about essential workers about her father. Emilia, welcome. Bienvenida.
Thank you so much, Lorela, and hello, everyone. My name is Emilia. I am talking from the state of Minnesota, so it's really, really cold right now. So my warm regards to everyone who's holding themselves together and warming our hearts and our spirits with so much hope of this bill and what it represents for the 11 million people in our country. My story is not unconventional. It's the story of a lot of people in the state of Minnesota and also in the union. We are part of a mixed status family. My father is undocumented. He's 65 years old. My husband is also undocumented and was left out of DACA because of his age. I was also undocumented for 20 years, and I was also left out of DACA for a few months because of my age, and recently became a permanent resident. So we are truly a mixed status family with our kids being born in Minnesota. A mixed status family in limbo of immigration bars, waiting times. My father has been waiting for his immigration remedy for 20 years, and he's been in Minnesota since 1992. And my father is also a COVID survivor. And what doctors call a long hauler, which are those with severe implications due to COVID and a slow and painful path to recovery. For 30 years, my father, with millions of essential and undocumented workers, have operated fundamental parts of the American gears and have oftentimes gotten crushed in them, crushed by structural racism, by corporate greed, gender oppression, and political inaction. I am clear that it is possible for essential work not to be sacrificial. My father's survival has taught me how time and action grounded in love, community, and justice cannot ever go wrong. Our movement and our families are made up of fighters. My father was a construction worker. He was a food system worker when he contracted COVID, and he had battled for his life in the hospital since November 17. He recently left the hospital in severe condition. He oftentimes didn't recognize us. His brain remains foggy. His lungs are still working to catch the air and oxygen on their own. He cannot walk by themselves, and he cannot do main functions on his own. But he remains hopeful, like many of us. He would have been asked things about the political reality to make sure that his brain was working, and he will not say the name of the former president. He will say President-elect. I know we live in President-elect Joe Biden times, and he will not name the other president. So that's how important this moment is for people like my dad. As Professor Eden Torres here in the state of Minnesota said it best, remember that we will not have survived this if we have not heard our hearts crying out for the freedom of it. Had our ancestors not filled us with the desire and ability to live an eternity in one journey, had we not known that we are already worth more than this task, and have we not suspected somewhere in us that this road will not break us. Immigrants like my father deserve a path to citizenship and a life with dignity. He deserved it before COVID, and he does after it. Workers like him keep our country going during the pandemic, and the first step in recovery as a country should be to guarantee his permanent status here. We need Congress and the White House to act. Immigrants like my father need a roadmap to citizenship via every path possible, through a series of bills or through reconciliation. How can we make sure to do the right thing by all workers who keep us going, those who have gotten sick, and the families of those who have died during the pandemic?
Congresswoman Garcia, can I turn to you? Because I think Emilia has posed the question.
Yes, first let me say, Emilia, mis más cordiales saludos a su papá, su familia, y a usted también. And as I mentioned before, President Biden's proposal will soon be introduced in the House and will offer much needed and certainly earned a pathway to citizenship for essential workers, we're told. Senators Padilla and Representative Castro are also working on a bill to immediately protect essential workers and their families from deportation and provide them a fast track to citizenship. And I will make sure to continue pushing for that as well. Ultimately, we need to use any opportunity available to pass legislation to create a path to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants in the U.S. Our communities have waited and suffered for far too long, and this is especially the case with COVID-19. If we truly believe that essential workers are special and unique and have been heroic and heroic, then it's time for us to be just to them.
Thank you, and thank you, Emilia. Gracias, and gracias, Congressman. I want to make sure that we cover one thing, and then I want to invite Citlali Bueno from ICIR Action, which is, we are going to continue to push on our vision, both the resolution, right, rally around the Biden bill, and from the movement's perspective and from our perspective, like I remember being in the House gallery in 2010 when the House got the DREAM Act through. And then I remember being in the Senate when Democrats failed to deliver on the votes necessary to reach cloture on DREAM. And the reason why I am so reflective on that moment right now is because even as we fight to get bipartisan support on these measures, we are very clear on the power that Democrats hold in this moment and the tools that are available to the Democrats and to your colleagues, to Democratic leadership, and to President Biden on really delivering on the commitment, right? And that is going to be the measure of success this year. And we really see you as the critical partners really in this effort, in leading the rest of the caucus and helping to, right, and Congresswoman Sanchez and others of really helping to drive and deliver on the promises in very concrete and specific ways so that we can actually get to signage of something, right? Not only introduction. So I really want to appreciate you showing up and being here and like fighting the good fight on the ground. And I want to invite Citlali Bueno from ICIR Action because we've heard the powerful stories tonight. We know the work that is happening on the ground. We know the work that our champions are leading on the Hill, both in the House and in the Senate. And what matters really is what we do with the anger that we feel about the injustice our communities face. So I want to invite you, Citlali, to really talk to the people who are tuning in and to say to anyone wondering, you know, what now? What's next? What do I do? How do I get involved? And so Citlali, lead us in that call to action that this moment requires of all of us.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Citlali Bueno. I am an immigration organizer in Chicago as part of Enlace Chicago, and also a proud member of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. I am also a DACA recipient who came to Chicago at the age of 2 with my family. My parents, siblings, and I all have different statuses. My mom is an essential worker in the food industry who has been in and out of work since the pandemic started. Myself and my parents currently have no pathway to citizenship, even though we've lived here for 23 years. For a long stretch, both my parents were out of work, and I was the sole breadwinner in our family through my organizing job. And as an organizer, I have been empowering my community in the neighborhood of Little Village in Chicago to fight around local, state, and federal immigration campaigns. I've also marched over 230 miles from New York City to Washington, D.C. to fight for DACA in 2019, and we won. When we fight, we win. And now the moment calls for so much more. We need relief for everyone, including my parents, my community, myself, you, and your loved ones. We must fight with everything we've got for a transformational change in our broken and racist immigration system. We need to fight for our families and our collective freedom and liberation. We are a powerful network of more than 37 statewide organizations spanning across 30 states throughout the country. So let's use our power. The next phase in our fight is to include essential workers, their family, and DACA and TPS holders in a pathway to citizenship in the next budget reconciliation package that will start to take shape next month. So if you are ready to join me, we need you to do 2 things. First, take out your phones right now and text FREEDOM to the number 40649 to get connected to a firm affiliate in your state. All politics are local, and we need to put on the local pressure. Second, make a plan to call your congressperson and senator to demand 2 things. First, that they co-sponsor the Roadmap to Freedom resolution. And second, that they fight to include a pathway to citizenship for essential workers, their family, and DACA and TPS holders in the next budget reconciliation package. So thank you all so much for fighting with us. Let's get things done.
Thank you, Citlali. We are going to get it on. That's a powerful call to action, a reminder and a grounding for all of us. So our time is coming to an end. We're over time, but I want to give each of you, to our members of Congress here, just 30 seconds before we close the night for any concluding remarks. And I'm gonna go to you, Congresswoman Clark.
Well, first of all, let me thank, the advocacy community for being a wind beneath our wings and really embracing and helping all of us to embrace the roadmap to freedom. There is no other road than the roadmap to freedom. It is our collective vision of transformation of America's broken immigration system, and it is guided by dignity, and it centers our humanness in the midst of it. And that sounds grandiose, but for so long we have abided with a broken, cruel, painful immigration system that it wasn't until 1964 even enabled people of color to come to the United States in dignity, and only to see all of those gains roll back. Like the civil rights movement, the immigration movement is rooted in our collective dignity. And so we're on the road together. We're on the road to freedom, and we're not going to stop until we get there.
Yes, thank you. Congressman Garcia.
I want to thank the organizers, fantastic advocates from across the country. First, I just want to say we must put the horrors of the Trump administration behind us, but also make certain that we never go back. That's why we need legislation. The roadmap to freedom is our blueprint to restore America as a beacon of hope and opportunity in the world. It's a blueprint to protect and strengthen a fair process centered on keeping families together, investing in our community-based alternatives to detention, increase protections for all workers regardless of status, establish a humane and effective border policy, and ultimately establish a just, compassionate immigration system. Proud to join Representatives Jayapal and Clark in this endeavor, presenting this landmark statement of our principles and values and a path forward for
I think can you hear me, Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I felt like it froze for a second there. Congresswoman Jayapal, bring us to the end point here. What's on your mind as we wrap?
Well, the first thing that's on my mind is just the power of those stories that we heard from all of the incredible speakers that talked about their own personal experiences. I just think we can't ever lose the groundedness in the humanity and the stories of people. So my incredible gratitude to everyone who told their stories and have been organized, the people that have been organizing on the ground for so long. The second thing is just a lesson from my 20 years of community organizing, which is that strength comes in times of crisis. And I think that despite the crisis of the last 4 years and the decades before that, the reality is we have just continued to be more and more powerful. And just listening to, people talking about the march, right, from I forget, I think it was New York to DC, and getting the DREAM Act. That is how policy change happens. It's through organizing on the outside and organizing on the inside. And now we have some great organizers on the inside that are working on this, my colleagues and champions in Congress. And so I guess I just want to end by saying that when we drafted the roadmap to freedom, it was done with community. It was done with all of you, with your organizations, because I really don't believe that we can get to good policy without drafting these things with the people that are going to be most impacted. And so I am so grateful to my colleagues for their work on the resolution, but also to people across this country who were a part of that process. To me, that is why it is such a powerful document, and it is our North Star for our vision for humane and just immigration policy in the United States. So thank you, Lorella, and thank you to everybody for attending tonight and for all the work you're going to do to make sure that we get tangible change, real results for people across our country who so desperately need it.
Thank you all for joining us today, for your leadership, for your insights. It's up to us, to the collective us, to you, to us, for us, our viewers, our partners, our leaders on the ground. It's our time to call members of Congress, time for you to continue to organize the Democratic caucus and make sure that that you have our power, right? You get to be the translators of, the transmitters of the power of the people who have tuned in today. You get to carry that fight in Congress. What an incredible privilege and responsibility. And we are so lucky to have you as our champions in there fighting the good fight and delivering for our community. And so thank you so much to all of you watching and joining in today. Call your members of Congress, email them, join our fight and our movement. Make sure that you text freedom to 40649. And thank you. We've got the roadmap to freedom. We're going to get that done, right? Little by little. And some moments are going to give us the opportunity to get more of that done. And as we walk that path, as we walk and march down that road, we're going to make sure that we use every tool at our disposal to deliver concrete change in people's lives. Thank you for tuning in tonight and for staying 15 minutes longer than maybe what you planned for. Have a good night, everyone.